In the year 1922, deep inside a collapsed palace on the island of Crete, archaeologists broke through a wall of ash and rubble and found something that should not have survived 3,500 years of fire, earthquake and war. Clay jars, some taller than a grown man, still sealed, still faintly smelling of something rich and green. When the seals were finally broken, the scent that escaped into the Mediterranean air was unmistakable. Oil, olive oil, pressed by hands that had turned to dust before the pyramids of Giza were even weathered by wind, yet somehow, impossibly, still holding its fragrance. The people who filled those jars believed this liquid was a gift from the gods themselves. They were not entirely wrong, because the story of the olive is not simply the story of a fruit or a tree or a cooking ingredient. It is the story of how a small, bitter, almost inedible berry from a windswept coastline quietly became one of the most powerful forces in human civilization, shaping empires, fueling wars, anointing kings, lighting the lamps of the ancient world, and feeding a philosophy of health that modern science is only now beginning to fully understand. And to understand how something so small could become so vast, we have to go back before Athens, back before Rome. Back to a time when the olive tree was not a symbol of peace, but a mystery struggling to survive. Picture a coastline roughly 8,000 to 6,000 years ago, somewhere along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, in the region we now call the Levant, stretching toward Crete and the wild hills of Anatolia. The wind here is relentless. The soil is thin and rocky, unfriendly to almost every crop known to early farmers. Wheat struggles, barley withers. But there is one tree, gnarled and silver-leafed, that seems to thrive on neglect. It grows where nothing else will. Its roots dig deep into cracks in limestone, drawing up water that no other plant can reach. Wild goats and birds feed on its small, bitter fruit and scatter its seeds across the hillsides. For thousands of years, this tree, the wild olive, existed simply as a survivor, tough and forgotten, offering little to the humans who occasionally passed beneath its branches. Its fruit, in its natural state, is almost unbearably bitter, filled with a compound that makes it nearly impossible to eat straight from the branch. And yet, somewhere in that distant, undocumented past, a human being discovered something that would change the destiny of that tree forever. Someone realized that if you crushed the fruit and let it sit and separated the liquid that emerged, you were left with something extraordinary. A golden, fragrant oil, unlike anything else nature offered at the time. No one knows the name of this person. No text records the moment. It is one of history's most important discoveries, and it happened in complete silence, sometime before writing itself even existed. What we do know from the patient work of archaeologists digging through layers of ancient soil is that by around 6,000 years ago, communities across the eastern Mediterranean had already learned to deliberately grow, not just gather, olive trees. Charred olive pits have been found in ancient hearths in what is now Israel and Jordan, dating back further than almost any other cultivated fruit on earth. This was not an accident of nature. Wild olive trees do not reliably produce fruit worth harvesting. Someone had to select the best trees, protect them, graft their branches, and wait years, sometimes over a decade, for a tree to mature enough to bear a proper harvest. This was an act of extraordinary patience, a kind of faith in the future that few other crops demanded. A farmer planting wheat could expect to harvest within months. A farmer planting an olive tree was making a promise to a grandchild he might never meet. And this, right here, is one of the quiet secrets buried inside the olive's history. Unlike almost every other staple crop of the ancient world, the olive tree forced human civilization to think in terms of generations rather than seasons. Villages that committed to olive cultivation were villages that expected to still exist decades later. They were villages planning permanence. By the time we reach ancient Crete, roughly 4,000 years ago, something remarkable had already occurred. The olive was no longer just food. It had become an economy. The Minoan civilization, one of the earliest advanced societies in Europe, built entire palace complexes seemingly organized around the storage and trade of olive oil. At the Palace of Knossos, archaeologists uncovered rows upon rows of massive storage jars called pithoi, many large enough to hold hundreds of liters of oil, arranged in storerooms that stretched for what must have felt like endless corridors of wealth. This was not oil meant only for cooking. Minoan oil was pressed, refined, scented with herbs and flowers, and shipped across the sea to Egypt, to the Levant, to distant trading partners whose names have been lost, but whose demand shaped Minoan society. Control of olive oil meant control of trade routes. Control of trade routes meant political power, and so thousands of years before anyone had coined the phrase, olive oil had already become liquid currency, the crude oil of the Bronze Age Mediterranean world. Yet even as it built economies, the olive was quietly building something else, something far less visible but arguably even more powerful meaning. In the sun-scorched world of the ancient Near East and later Greece, oil was light. Before electricity, before gas lamps, the small clay lamp filled with olive oil and a simple wick was often the only thing standing between a household and total darkness after sunset. Every temple, every home, every workshop that wished to function after dark depended on this oil. To run out of olive oil was to be plunged, quite literally, into darkness. This single fact alone explains why the olive became so deeply entangled with religion and spirituality across so many ancient cultures. Light in nearly every ancient belief system represented divinity, knowledge, and protection against evil. And the substance that created that light, night after night, inside temples and homes alike, was olive oil. It is no coincidence that in the Hebrew Bible, olive oil was used to anoint priests and kings, a sacred act symbolizing divine favor and legitimacy. It is no coincidence that the very word, Christ, in its Greek origin, relates to the concept of being anointed with oil. Long before it touched a plate of food, olive oil touched the foreheads of the chosen, the crowned, and the blessed. Now travel with me to ancient Greece, somewhere around the 7th century before Christ, into the heart of a city just beginning to imagine itself as something extraordinary. According to a legend recorded by ancient historians, the city of Athens was born from a divine argument. The sea god Poseidon and the goddess Athena each offered the people of Attica a gift, hoping to become the city's patron deity. Poseidon struck the earth with his trident and produced a spring of water, but the water, some versions of the story say, was salty and undrinkable, a symbol of naval power but little practical use. Athena, in contrast, offered something quieter but far more enduring. She struck the ground and an olive tree grew, providing food, oil, light, medicine, and wood. The people of Athens chose Athena's gift, whether myth or manipulated propaganda by later Athenian storytellers eager to justify their city's identity. The message embedded within this legend is unmistakable. The Greeks themselves believed their civilization was quite literally founded upon the olive tree, and they treated it accordingly. Ancient Athenian law, according to surviving historical sources, imposed extraordinarily strict protections on olive trees. Some accounts suggest that destroying a sacred olive tree could be punished severely, even by exile, because these trees were considered public property belonging to the goddess herself, regardless of whose land they physically stood on. Farmers were permitted to harvest the fruit, but the trees themselves were treated almost as living monuments. Olympic champions, the greatest athletes of the ancient world, were crowned not with gold, but with a simple wreath cut from a sacred olive tree said to have grown near the temple of Zeus at Olympia. Imagine that, in a civilization that had access to gold, silver, and precious jewels, the highest honor a human being could receive for physical excellence was a few humble olive leaves twisted into a circle, because the Greeks understood something that modern society sometimes forgets. True value is not always found in what glitters. Sometimes it is found in what quietly sustains life, generation after generation. The Greek philosopher and physician Hippocrates, often called the father of Western medicine, reportedly prescribed olive oil for an extraordinary range of ailments, from skin conditions and wounds to digestive troubles, treating it almost as a universal remedy. Wrestlers and athletes rubbed olive oil across their bodies before competition. Mothers used it on newborn infants. It was cooked with burned for light, used in religious rituals, and rubbed into aching muscles after battle. Few substances in ancient daily life carried such a staggering range of simultaneous purposes, but the olive's greatest historical partnership was still to come. When the Roman Republic began its slow, relentless expansion across the Mediterranean world, it did not simply conquer land. it conquered olive groves. As Roman legions marched across what is now Spain, southern France, North Africa, and the Greek world, Roman engineers and settlers systematically expanded olive cultivation on a scale the ancient world had never witnessed. Rome did not merely consume olive oil. Rome industrialized it. Massive Roman shipwrecks discovered on the floor of the Mediterranean Sea, still today, are frequently found loaded with thousands of ceramic amphora, cylindrical jars specifically designed for transporting oil across vast distances. Near the city of Rome itself, archaeologists have uncovered an astonishing hill formed almost entirely from the broken remains of these discarded oil jars. This artificial hill, known today as Monte Testaccio, rises nearly 50 meters into the sky, composed of the fragments of an estimated 25 million shattered amphorae. Every single fragment once carried olive oil into the heart of the empire. Stand at the base of that hill today, and you are standing at the foot of a monument built not from marble or stone, but from centuries of olive oil consumption. It is, quite literally, a mountain made of appetite. Roman soldiers received olive oil as part of their standard rations, alongside grain and wine, forming what historians often refer to as the essential dietary trinity of the ancient Mediterranean world. Roman baths, those grand social centers of the empire, depended on olive oil not for cooking, but for cleansing. Without soap as we understand it today, Romans coated their bodies in oil, then scraped it off using a curved metal tool called a strigil, removing dirt, sweat, and dead skin in the process. An entire daily ritual of hygiene, relaxation, and social status revolved around this single golden substance. Roman law itself began regulating olive oil quality, taxation, and trade with a level of bureaucratic seriousness usually reserved for grain or precious metals. Roman writers even ranked different regions of oil production by quality, not unlike modern wine critics evaluating vineyards, revealing an early, sophisticated culture of agricultural connoisseurship that predates similar European wine culture by well over 1,000 years. And yet, for all its wealth and glory, the olive carried a darker side within the Roman world too, one rarely mentioned in casual retellings of history. The massive expansion of Roman olive plantations across conquered provinces relied heavily on slave labor. Vast estates, known as latifundia, were often worked by enslaved men and women who cultivated, harvested, and pressed the very oil that fueled Roman luxury, lit Roman lamps, and cleansed Roman bodies in the baths. Behind every golden drop of prosperity lay human suffering, rarely acknowledged in the marble inscriptions and triumphant historical accounts left behind. History, as always, is rarely as clean as its monuments suggest. As the Roman Empire eventually fractured and crumbled, many assumed the olive's golden age faded into decline along with it. But history had other plans. As the eastern half of the empire evolved into the Byzantine world, and as Islamic civilization began its extraordinary rise across North Africa, the Iberian Peninsula, and the Middle East, the olive tree found new devoted caretakers. Islamic scholars and physicians, drawing upon an expanding classical Greek medical knowledge, continued studying and praising olive oil's properties within their own sophisticated medical traditions. The olive tree receives notable reverence within Islamic religious texts as well, described in the Quran using imagery evoking blessing and illumination, once again connecting this tree across yet another civilization and yet another faith to the ancient, recurring symbolism of sacred light. Muslim agricultural innovations across Andalusia, in what is now southern Spain, introduced advanced irrigation techniques that allowed olive cultivation to flourish even further, laying groundwork for Spain's eventual rise centuries later as one of the largest olive oil-producing nations on earth. Then came an unexpected twist in the story, one that would carry the olive tree across an ocean no ancient civilization had ever imagined crossing. When European explorers and colonizers began arriving in the Americas during the 16th century, they brought olive cuttings with them, planting the first olive trees in the soil of modern-day Mexico, Peru, and eventually California. It is a strange, almost poetic detail of history that some of the oldest living olive trees in the Western Hemisphere today were planted by Spanish missionaries centuries ago, quiet green witnesses to the collision of two entirely separate worlds. The olive tree that had once fed Bronze Age Cretans and crowned Greek Olympic champions was now taking root in a hemisphere that had never known its existence, continuing a journey that had already spanned thousands of years and thousands of miles. For centuries afterward, the olive remained largely a Mediterranean and increasingly a global staple, its role gradually shifting from sacred symbol toward everyday culinary companion. But its most surprising chapter may actually be unfolding right now, in laboratories rather than temples. Beginning in the latter half of the 20th century, medical researchers studying certain Mediterranean populations noticed something curious. Communities across coastal Italy, Greece, and Spain, who consumed olive oil as their primary dietary fat, appeared to experience significantly lower rates of certain cardiovascular diseases compared to populations in Northern Europe and North America consuming diets higher in saturated animal fats. This observation eventually contributed to what researchers now widely refer to as the Mediterranean dietary pattern, a way of eating extensively studied for its potential associations with heart health. Modern scientific research has identified that olive oil, particularly the less processed variety known as extra virgin olive oil, contains notably high concentrations of monounsaturated fatty acids, along with naturally occurring compounds called polyphenols, which possess antioxidant properties. Some clinical studies have suggested associations between regular olive oil consumption and improved markers of cardiovascular health, though researchers are careful to emphasize that dietary patterns overall, rather than any single ingredient in isolation, likely account for the broader health outcomes observed in Mediterranean populations. It would be historically dishonest and scientifically irresponsible to claim olive oil functions as some miraculous cure, a claim ancient physicians occasionally made without modern clinical evidence to support it. What we can honestly say is this: thousands of years before modern nutritional science existed, ancient Mediterranean cultures had already, through generations of lived experience, stumbled toward a dietary relationship with the olive that contemporary research continues to find genuinely worthy of serious scientific attention. There is one more mystery, one final surprising fact that deserves to close this story. Scattered across the Mediterranean world today, standing quietly in olive groves in Croatia, Greece, Israel, and Italy, are trees believed by botanists and historians to be well over 1,000 years old, with some controversial estimates suggesting certain specimens may exceed 2,000 years of continuous life. Living organisms that were already ancient when Rome fell, that were already old when medieval crusaders marched past their branches, still producing fruit today, still being harvested by farmers whose great-grandparents also once stood beneath the very same silver leaves. There is something almost unbearably moving about that fact, something that pierces straight through the noise of modern life. In an age where nearly everything is designed to be replaced, upgraded, and forgotten within a matter of years, these trees have simply continued, quietly, patiently, bearing fruit through empires rising and empires collapsing, through plagues, wars, revolutions, and the invention of electricity, the automobile, and the internet, utterly indifferent to the churn of human history happening around them, and yet forever entangled within it. So the next time you see a small bottle of olive oil sitting on a kitchen shelf, perhaps overlooked, perhaps taken entirely for granted, consider what you are actually looking at. You are looking at the descendant of trees that anointed kings and lit ancient temples. You are looking at a substance so valuable it once functioned as currency, so sacred it crowned Olympic champions instead of gold, so essential it built mountains from its own discarded packaging outside the walls of Rome. You are looking at a plant so patient it forced entire civilizations to think generations ahead of themselves, and so enduring that some of the very trees planted in antiquity are quite possibly still standing, still bearing fruit, at this very moment, somewhere beneath the Mediterranean sun. History rarely announces its most powerful forces loudly. Sometimes civilization's true foundations are small, bitter and green, growing quietly on a windswept hillside, waiting patiently for someone willing to notice.